everybody, and welcome to my second video in this short series of videos that I'm doing here for Orchestra the Swan. Today I'm going to focus on talking about Mozart's horn concertos, and specifically his Mozart horn concerto number 4 and the last movement, the Rondo. So this is probably one of the most famous pieces of French horn music, and definitely is the piece of classical music that probably most people will associate with the horn, and definitely the one that as a professional horn player I've been asked to play most over the years. Now, if any of you saw my first video, you'll know that this has a special meaning for me too, because it was the first piece of music that I got introduced to when I decided I wanted to play the horn. Not in its typical form, but through the Flanders and Swans song, which is a very, very funny version of this piece of music. So Mozart wrote 4 horn concertos. Funnily enough, the horn concerto number 1 was actually the last one he finished, and it's the shortest. It's only 2 movements, and it's very much more simple than the others, and it's also the only one in D major. So actually his horn concerto number 1 is very rarely played, and actually the only one that I haven't thus far performed. Now, his concertos 2, 3 and 4 are all in E flat major, and they all follow a very similar pattern. So a first movement allegro moderato, then a romance slow movement, and then all 3 end with a rondo. Now, Mozart wrote all of these horn concertos for his very good friend Joseph Leutger, and Mozart concerto number 4, which is K495, he finished in 1786, and it really shows off a lot of the techniques that Leutger must have had. He must have been a very skillful player. The concerto, all of his concertos were actually written for the natural horn. Now, in one of my later videos, I'll be talking a bit more about the history of the horn, but just to give you a brief overview, at the moment, on modern instruments, we have valves, and these valves are what help us to change the notes. Back at the time that Mozart was writing, the French horns of the time didn't have valves. So instead, people used their hands to change the notes. So, a very different technique, and one that we'll talk a little bit more about in a later video. Now, Mozart's horn concertos are some of the most played pieces by French horn players everywhere, and you'll get very young people learning them. You'll get people continuing to play them throughout their whole career, and if any of you are horn players, I would suggest that you definitely go away and learn these pieces. Sometimes we think, oh, it's the most well-known thing, it's overdone, it's overplayed. But I promise you, when you really get to know these pieces, you will end up loving them. Now, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the rondo and the last movement, and I thought it might be fun to show you a video of when I played my first Mozart concerto. So when I was 15, I performed Mozart's horn concerto number 2 with my joint schools orchestra, Stratford-upon-Avon Girls' Grammar School and King Edward VI Grammar School for Boys. So I thought I would play you a bit of the last movement, the beginning of the last movement of Mozart's horn concerto number 2, and you can see how I started playing these concertos a long time ago and still know and love them now. all of these last movements that are called rondos showed kind of really obvious examples of the hunting horn style. Mozart was definitely influenced by the corps de chasse and the sort of pure capabilities of the instrument, and especially in his last movements he tends to use triads, the tonic and dominant triads, very clearly. And in the rondo form he sets the initial melody, and the nature of the rondo theme means that that section will be repeated throughout the movement. So we will have theme A, the rondo, and then a different section. Then we'll have theme A, the rondo theme, back again, then section C, then A, then C. And that's what the rondo theme means. And he really uses that a lot in his music, but specifically for the horn. So we've heard the beginning of the last movement of Mozart 2. I thought now it would be good for us to hear the beginning of the last movement of Mozart 3. So this is a recording from my second year at university. So I'm at Newnham College in Cambridge. I'm probably 19. And again, just showing you that you can just keep playing these pieces again and again, and every time you do, you'll learn something new. So this is the beginning of Mozart 3, the last movement. I'm sure that you could hear there the similarities between Mozart 2 and Mozart 3 last movement. It's a well-known joke amongst the horn-playing world that you can start playing one movement and accidentally end playing the opposite concerto, playing a different concerto to the one you started. So I think it's only right now that before we get into a little bit more detail about the K495 Mozart 4 Rondo, that I should play that one for you now. So I'm just going to play you the first part of the last movement, and I hope you enjoy. So we can see then that in Mozart's rondos, he, for the second, third and fourth horn concertos, he used the 6/8 time signature, which really created this sort of hunting horn style chasse effect. He also used the repeated notes as a theme throughout, as well as this kind of triadic movement. So just to hear them more closely together, to see the similarities, this was the beginning of Mozart 2. So there we can really see he's introducing those ideas. Mozart 3, the last movement. So again, we've got those repeated notes that are definitely a thematic pattern that he likes to use in these rondo movements. And then Mozart 4. So we've really got those clear themes throughout, and that's really a key feature of Mozart's horn concertos, actually quite extensively. He also wrote a concert rondo, which was in isolation, which just shows how much he really enjoyed writing that kind of style of music for the horn. And actually that hunting horn theme has been used really widely throughout the world ever since. So down to Wagner's operas and the Siegfried horn call. So that, for example, is a really clear place where a composer has used that kind of hunting theme for the horn in a really specific context, because there he really is signalling that Siegfried is coming in from the woods. So we can see that there are those similar patterns all throughout these rondos. We then have the minor sections that will come sort of interspersed between the rondo theme, and each one obviously gives its own little bit of individuality and uniqueness to it. Now I thought that lastly in this video I would just have a little chat about transposition. So transposition is something that horn players will know and love, or possibly hate, depending on who you speak to, but it's something that is a really, really integral part of life as a horn player. So Mozart actually wrote these horn concertos in E flat. This is numbers 2, 3 and 4 that I'm talking about now. Which means, for anyone that's not sure, that as a horn player, if we see a note, we have to play that note one whole tone lower, because the French horn sits in the key of F. So unlike the piano and the violin, which are in C, the horn is in F. Now, the horn being in F doesn't really cause us problems on a daily basis, because we just read the notes that we read, which are the fingerings that we have learned. They just sound different to instruments in other keys. However, if a composer writes in a different key to F, then we have to transpose. So in this piece, in the rondo, what we actually see written down, for example, at the very beginning, are the notes G and then the note C. So G, C, 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 C. But what we play is F and then B flat. So we have to see every note and play one tone lower. Now, sounds like a complicated thing, and to be honest, at first when you're learning it, it does feel it sometimes. But I can guarantee you that over time, you don't even notice it. It's like, I suppose, learning to read. It's tricky at first, but once you've done it, you don't really give it much thought. So I have played operas before, where I have played horn in E flat, horn in D, horn in D flat, horn in C, horn in B flat, horn in B flat alto, horn in C, all within the course of one piece of music. So you're constantly switching between the two. I would suggest though that if you're learning this concerto, try really hard to play it from the original score. Don't cheat and play from the horn in F part, which lots of editors have done. somehow learning that skill of transposition is a really vital thing for understanding really what Mozart was writing. And although he would have been writing it for the natural horn, so we would have had an E-flat crook that we pop into the back of the instrument and we'd have been using our hands, I just think it feels much more kind of realistic to learn to play it in the original key. So that's your challenge. If you're learning it at the moment in F, try that transposition. Down a tone is one of the kindest and the nicest of the transpositions, so give that one a go.